Okay, I think we are ready to start. A very warm welcome to all the participants in India and Europe, and thank you in advance for your participation. My name is Panagiotis Karamanos. I am the team leader for the International Urban Cooperation Project of the European Union in India. Today we have an interest to talk about financing for sustainable development projects and climate projects. Outside the presentations, and we encourage all of you to participate during the interactions. At the end of the sessions, we will have four more interactions. During the next 2 hours, please raise any questions that you have at your chat box. So without further delay, we will start with the program and with the agenda for the day. And I would like to invite Mr. Poppens, who is the Deputy Director General from the Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy of the European Commission, for his welcome remarks. Mr. Poppens, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Panagiotis, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody. This morning our virtual connections were not very good here in Brussels, so I was slightly delayed, but I'm happy that I was able to connect and be with you to open this discussion between the European Union and India. And I'm very happy that this is not just a discussion between the governments, it is involving all levels of governance, and particularly our cities. And why? Because it's no secret that cities are in the forefront of pretty much everything. They are the centers of our economic development. They promote innovation, research, business development, small and medium-sized enterprises. They are centers of culture and social life for us. But they also face a lot of problems, and particularly now in the light of the COVID crisis, we all have noticed that cities have really suffered, and it revealed also that we need to help them maybe much more and need to rethink the way that we provide them with advice, with solutions, and with financing, and that is a topic you will discuss today a lot. Obviously, for the EU, we work a lot with our urban authorities. We have the EU urban agenda established, and we also support cities through our cohesion policy instruments. Particularly, there is a specific earmarking for the Regional Development Fund to support integrated development strategies, sustainable integrated development strategies directly for cities, even if we work in a shared management with member states. And we also have direct instruments, and I'm happy that we also have the International Urban Cooperation Program. And this is, I think, the framework in which the cities in both sides, in the European Union and India, but in fact this program has involved 165 cities in the first phase, half of EU member state cities and many partners around the globe, including India, where we had, I think, 8 partnerships established between cities. It is important program, because when we want to help our cities everywhere, I think it's good to benchmark each other. It's good to look not just in your own country, but to go further, look for solutions, look for ideas, and in this case, we also can provide financing to those cities who want to cooperate. And to me, the word cooperation is a key word. That is how we should look at our problems, because only by working together within the European Union and with our partners all over the world, including India, we can find solutions. We will continue our International Urban Cooperation Program also in future. We will extend it even. We will try to have a thematic concentration, but that's not something new for all of you who are here, because you know that also under the EU-India partnership agreement and our cooperation frameworks, we already cooperating, for example, on the smart and sustainable growth, which will be a thematic cluster also under our future IUC. We are also extending it to regions. Why? Because obviously we view urban not just as a city centers and metropolitan areas. We do think that the future of cities is within the functional urban areas, which include, the smaller, medium-sized cities, which include the rural areas surrounding cities, because only by working together, they will be able to ensure that there is a sustainable development in those territories and that people can live there and benefit from access to services, from quality services and also quality work, and they can find much more opportunities for their quality of life. So this is our approach, and we are happy that also the next IUC will be called the International Urban and Regional Cooperation. So we hope that this work both in thematic clusters and also continuing to finance pair-to-pair, this pairing of different cities will work, and that you will participate in this program. Obviously, it's not about program as such. It is about, as I said, fostering cooperation and finding solutions. Particularly in these difficult times, before Corona crisis, we already know that the cities were suffering from demographic challenges, from aging. Now we need to make this transformation, this green and digital transformation, which is an absolutely necessity in our view. It's not even a choice or question. We need to go through this. And this is where we need to provide cities with as much help as we can. It's not about financing only. There are many financing opportunities exist out there in the world, and I know that cities sometimes can get lost, where to go, what to do, and this is where I think we can also help them. So with these words, I will stop. I will give the floor back to you. I wish all participants a very successful event today, and I hope that very soon we will have our second India-EU Urban Forum. I don't know in what format it will take place, but certainly we look forward to our future cooperation also in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Poppens, for your welcome remarks. I would like to also stress the importance of the continuation, that this process, which started a few years ago, will continue with the new project, the International Urban and Regional Cooperation. And this will give us the opportunity, on the one hand, to build on the existing cooperations with cities like Panjim or Nagpur and many others, but also to establish new partnerships. With this in mind, I would like now to pass the floor to Ms. Camilla Christensen-Rai, who is the Counselor of the Delegation of the European Union to India, who will be making some short remarks and will be introducing also the video by the Ambassador of the European Union to India, Mr. Ugo Astuto. Ms. Christensen-Rai, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today. I look forward to our meeting. So I'm Camilla Christensen-Rai. I'm counselor at the EU delegation here in New Delhi. I work on the partnership between India and EU on smart and sustainable urbanization. And in a moment we will have a message from our ambassador. As a part of the welcome and setting the scene for our meeting today, I'd just like to mention we are in the process of planning the second EU-India Urban Forum in an online mode. So we look forward to revert in this regard, and look forward to your participation, of course, as well. So now we will go over to the message from our ambassador, head of delegation in New Delhi. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, thank you very much for joining at this event. The world is a very different place now post-COVID. The crisis served as a strong reminder of the need to tackle global challenges together, strengthening multilateralism and reforming it where necessary. The first and most pressing priority is obviously to overcome the pandemic, but an equally pressing and crucial area is to protect the environment, to fight against climate change, and to protect biodiversity. More broadly, over the next 2 years, governments around the world will spend around 10 trillion euro for the recovery. The choices we make today will define the next generation's lives. We want not only to recover, but to come out of the crisis with a better economy, greener, more digital, more resilient, fit for the next generation. The summit between India and the European Union last July endorsed a roadmap to 2025, which includes ambitious objectives for our partnership for smart and sustainable urbanization. Our partnership supports smart and sustainable cities. It promotes investments in sustainable urbanization, on climate action, and disaster risk reduction. It also deals with very practical challenges, such as effective solid waste management, developing effective water supply and sewage systems, as well as innovation in housing. Cities have a very important role to play in green recovery. Before concluding, let me point out again that an active partnership with India is essential in the pursuit of sustainable development goals. And our partnership on urban cooperation is a good case in point. We shall continue to strengthen it and make it fit for the new challenges ahead. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank all the presenters of the opening session. This concludes the opening session. So now I would like to pass the virtual floor to Ms. Giorgia Rambelli, who is the head of the IUC coordination unit. Giorgia, the floor is yours, so we can move on to the respective sections. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our speakers, of course, and thank you very much, Panagiotis, for the kind introduction. So first of all, I would like to thank also all the participants for being with us today. It would be a great pleasure for me to accompany you in this journey of discussion that we aim to have, and I would like to reiterate our invitation to please post your questions, your comments in our chat, and to engage as much as possible into the conversation. As mentioned by Panagiotis earlier, we will have two parts to our session today. In the first part, we will have some food for thought and some opportunities to learn more about what cities worldwide are doing in trying to raise and increase their access to finance, but also an overview of different activities and funding opportunities that our experts of finance have been mapping, and I will give the floor to them very shortly. After that, we will break out into different sessions, and we will have the opportunity to really dig into more the conversation on how to develop better bankable projects, how to identify different types of funding that might be useful and fitting for purpose for your own cities. So look forward to that discussion as well. To get us started, maybe some food for thought also from my side. So we have already heard a few times since the beginning of our session today how cities are right now on the spotlight. They are not only a primary hub of the economic development and cultural activities, but also they function as administrators, as service provider, and they have to do all of this into an increasingly complex world where social, environmental, and economic aspects really come together and are incredibly interlinked. They have, of course, a lot of very important aspects that they need to tackle, supporting the society, working with the private sector, trying to also foster as much as possible sustainable development for their own communities. To meet these objectives, they really need quite a bit of knowledge, a lot of information, but also adequate resources. And the resources is what we want to focus on today. Unfortunately, they are often not able to attract adequate investment. They have not access to the financial flows that they need, but also they are not able, for example, to connect to the private sector very often in the way that would be necessary to really scale the amount of funding needed for this infrastructure and very important projects that they need to develop. So today we want to really zoom in into these aspects and discuss a little bit what is still needed, what kind of gaps do we still need to bridge in order to facilitate this process. So we will look into what kind of strategies are cities following when investing in key themes related to sustainable urban development and climate action. What are the main factors that are still holding back the investment that are needed? What are some of the most common and the most innovative even funding mechanisms that we can apply for our cities, and what are the pros and cons? Because very often, of course, there is no solution that fits all. It is important also to understand the context in which these instruments can really work. So to get us started with this important conversation, it is my pleasure to welcome to our virtual floor two key experts that will share some food for thought as a basis for our conversation. And we will start with Mr. Nilab Singh. He's a senior expert in the IUC India team who will share with us some insights from a report that the team has been developing, mapping different kinds of activity and financial sources. So Nilab, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Georgia. Namaskar and good morning. It's indeed a pleasure to be kick-starting the business end of our virtual session webinar. I will start my presentation and I will talk in the next 10 minutes about some of the areas which have been prioritized in India with respect to urbanization and where the funds or the investments are being channelized. And also I will talk also a bit about the manual that we have developed during this process of the IUC. So the International Urban Cooperation started developing a manual which compiled all the financial instruments that were available to stakeholders in India, and we kind of did a stakeholder consultation both from the supply as well as demand side. So we talked to the Indian cities who were the primary sort of project owners and the recipients of some of the funding, and also on the other hand we spoke to agencies that were willing to provide funds and to try to see where the mismatch was, because as we have just heard and we have been hearing, there is a lot of capital in the market that is willing to invest in urban development and climate resilient projects, and on the other hand there are a lot of projects that require funding, but somehow these have not met their optimal demand and supply needs. And therefore, we thought that we should have this conversation and see where is the gap in this respect. So I'm just trying to, So if you look at the urban agenda in India and where the budget is coming from, and for this discussion today, we will limit our conversation to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which is the nodal agency in India responsible for all urbanization issues. So the ministry for this year, 2021, has a budget allocation of roughly 50,000 crores, which comes to 5.6 billion euros. And this is a hike of 18% from the last year. The total budget allotted is 1.6% of the country's annual budget. And this has been steadily rising. Now, as we know, in India, there are roughly 4,000 cities. So in that light, this budget might not appear that substantial if you are considering the number of cities that a country like India has. And it's of course a debate, and I'm not trying to, at this point of time, say whether it's less or it's more. I think every government tries to allot funds or budgets in the most optimal manner. But it's just to inform the audience here as to what the current situation is. So within the ministry, there are certain key projects, or I would say themes that the ministry is implementing. So one is, of course, the metro. So 40% of the total ministry's budget is going into metros. And as we all know, in India, there's a rapid construction going on in the metro sector. From some estimates, I know India is building or is going to build for the next 10 years approximately 100 kilometers of metro line every day. So that is the kind of estimates that have come into the development of the metro lines. Then the next two important projects or the missions that the ministry has is the Smart Cities mission and the Amrit. Both of them are focused on developing and rejuvenating urban infrastructure related to water, waste management, greenfield development, brownfield development, and smarter technologies and solutions. And the third important element is the Swachh Bharat mission, which is primarily meant to provide connected sanitation all over the urban areas. And finally, there is the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, which is also translates to housing for all, so the affordable housing scheme, which is being implemented to re-establish the slum dwellers and to rehabilitate them in much more organized dwellings. So this is primarily how the budget of the ministry has been split up or is utilized. Now, where is this money going? So, of course, I have talked about the sectors that it is going, and this is more assessment, and it's not based on any empirical figures, but this is more the understanding after we have had various consultations. So if I just talked about metro investing a lot within physical infrastructure. In terms of capacity building and stakeholder engagement, we believe the investments there are medium to low. Similarly, in the case of water sector, there is a lot of investments going in to have supplying connected water to the dwellers, citizens. But if you again look at the stakeholder engagement, the amount of funds going there is quite low. So if we were to sort of categorize this slide and look at where the money is going, so obviously there's a lot of money going in physical infrastructure. There's also, we can see of late, a lot of capacity building. Of course, this was made in the pre-COVID times. And because of COVID, certain priorities have changed. But there were a lot of investments and, even through the IUC and some of the programs, there's a lot of capacity building and technical assistance being provided. But one of the key elements where we think we can provide more is to have more stakeholder engagement. And I will come to that in some sense in my presentation. But from our point of view, stakeholder engagement is key to make all the technology implementations successful, and we should look at having more focus within this area. I will try to run a bit faster. So we talked to a lot of the Indian cities and the ULBs to try to understand what the challenges are, and we of course also did a lot of secondary research on this. One is, of course, there is insufficient state financing, which is both from the state as well as center. The second element is the local budgets are deficient because there are not enough revenue streams. So a lot of the revenue or main revenue comes from taxation and user charges, and those are not optimal to meet all the expenditures. Third, and I think quite importantly, is the inadequate capacity to generate capital in order to maintain the existing infrastructure. And this capacity element is extremely important for the ULBs to develop what we call bankable projects. The fourth aspect we noted was that there is a misalignment between the short-term and the long-term ambitions for a particular project. And this relates to having more bankable or projects that are viewed by funding institutions to be of high relevance. And finally, the high upfront capital requirements for certain projects compared to the risk and return did not make some of these projects very attractive. So the ULB in some sense is trying to navigate through these challenges where it doesn't really have the capacity. Especially, I would say, the tier 2 or tier 3 cities. How can we overcome these challenges? And this is based on what we discussed with the funding institutions. So on the other hand, organizations, especially international organizations, multilateral development banks, are quite keen to provide grants. But they want to make sure that the cities are capable enough to handle them. So urban infrastructure is a combination of equity, debt, and risk. And I'm sure all of you understand equity, debt, and risk, but for those who don't, equity means providing a part of your own assets or your own ownership to somebody else and raise capital through that. Debt is, of course, going through the bond markets and taking capital loans and then providing interest rates to the others. And finally, it is the element of risk that is quite important here. So risk would directly translate into the cost of a particular project. The second aspect is to try and raise capital internally rather than externally. So endogenous sources of capital are always much more efficient and more reliable compared to external. The third is to try and blend various financing and funding instruments. So in my last slide, I will show that there is a whole lot of tools available, but you have to be smart and creative in trying to manage these tools. I talked about internal capacities. I think that is the key here. And the cities, in my opinion, the organization of cities, of ULBs, need to restructure and reorganize themselves more towards a corporate field. So, for example, I think communications in a city is extremely important. So, cities need to have on board experts who are as good as the communication experts in the corporate sector, in my opinion. We need to have the best technology knowledge or the technology advisors. So, for example, appointing CIOs or CTOs in cities is also a very important function. And I know today the Smart Cities Mission in India has appointed PMCs or project management consultants who are required to do that job. And there is, of course, a lot of change happening, but I think there's still a long way to go to achieve that. For sake of time, I'll quickly move on. So the manual that we have structured has basically three elements. So talking about the financing, which focuses on the CapEx part, building the required infrastructure, then how do you fund or manage from an operation and maintenance point of view. And the third is the capacity building element. And this manual is available online on the link that is mentioned here. You can download it and try to go through it. And this is the final slide, which talks about, on the left-hand side, the various financing sources available. So there's public money through grants, subsidies, low interest, pool financing, and viability gap funding. There are private investments through private capital, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, crowdfunding, private-public partnerships, innovation platforms, and then there's international funds available. Similarly, on the funding side, it's basically tax revenues, user charges, and brownfield asset management, that cities can raise capital endogenously. So with this, I will end my presentation. I think I'm 2 minutes over, but it lays down a very good starting point for the following presentation. So Georgia, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nilab, for your introduction, and also not only for giving us an overview of the different potential sources that we can exploit, but also for looking a little bit into an overview of the different spending and to raise two very important points, one related to capacity building, which is, of course, together with technical assistance, crucial, but also to start just talking about stakeholder engagement. So we look forward to discussing that, and I know that in the chat there is already a question regarding this. But with everyone's permission, I would like to park that question specifically for later and rather invite our second expert to present her overview before we start our discussion. So it's my pleasure to welcome to the floor Mrs. Hester Mojoroshi. She's a finance expert here at our IUC coordination unit, and she will talk to us about innovative solutions for local governments to access and leverage funding for climate action and sustainable urban development. I understand that Esther's contribution will be recorded, so I would ask kindly my colleagues to please put the registration on.
First of all, let me welcome you at today's regional dialogue. I'm Esther Mojoroshi, finance expert at the IUC coordination unit. With my presentation, I would like to give you a quick overview on innovative financing tools and mechanisms building on the IUC publication with the same title. You might already know, as we organized a webinar on that earlier this year, and it is also uploaded to the website. I also hope to be complementary to the presentation of Mr. Singh and the report Financing Sustainable and Climate Resilient Urban Development in India, which includes already many of the financing tools I'm going to say. Maybe let's start with what we mean on innovative financing. There are several ways to define what innovative financing could mean. And here I used two quotations that I find the closest to my understanding, but there is, of course, a broad literature with different approaches. In what everyone agrees is that besides the traditional ways, the role of new financial instruments and the engagement of the private sector became vital. One cannot rely on one source. It needs to be innovative to find and secure a mixture of different financing sources. Depending on the local government's autonomy, capacity of co-financing, raised private capital, level of creditworthiness, and the project's revenue generation potential, there are various solutions and their combinations. Before presenting some of the most used innovative financing tools, I would like to stop for a minute and think why we have to be innovative and from where this finance can come from. Urban projects, particularly when we speak about infrastructure projects, are large, and in most of the cases, own sources are not enough and external finance is needed. This external finance can be raised and used in innovative ways such as bonds or public-private partnerships, and I will present some of those with the advantages and disadvantages later today. But before going there, I would like to point out that the local government has much better chances to get this external finance if it knows how to use its own sources in a smart way. And when I say own sources, I don't only mean the liquidity, but also the land and the assets. Looking at the project cycle development, the first steps like enabling environment, climate action planning, the pre-feasibility stage are critical to develop bankable projects. Going through these steps, it's also not cheap. The project preparation is 12% of the project cost. Still, no one is interested in financing premature ideas. To be able to show the robustness of the project and engage investors, international financial institutions, in most of the cases, local governments have to manage these first three stages on their own and building on own sources. This is what requires commitment and yes. Projects can be financed from subnational, national, and international sources, and among those we can then distinguish, of course, public and private. Although since many years private actors invest more in climate finance than public actors, only 30% of the local projects are financed by the private sector, meaning there is a huge untapped potential. Furthermore, if we look at these graphs, we can see that among the different public sources, most of the projects have finance from national sources, including own sources. I don't want to say to forget about the multilateral development banks or the climate funds, but what I would like to point out is that when one thinks about how to raise money to kickstart a project or finance a smaller scale project, the focus shall be also on own sources and the private sector. Starting now with the energy performance contract, the EPC is a contract where an array of services is agreed and the provider of the services is able to guarantee that a minimum of energy savings or a sustainability value will be achieved. There is an energy service company, it's a so-called ESCO, who implements a customized energy service package which usually includes the planning, building, operation, and maintenance. An important advantage of this model is that this model can be suitable for local governments that can't finance upfront costs. EPC contracts can guarantee that a certain percentage of savings will be achieved with the risk taken by the ESCO. And if the guaranteed performance is not achieved, the ESCO would pay back the local government. Costs for the maintenance are saved during the contractual period, and there is the guarantee that the ESCO will keep the system at its best performance. Regarding the disadvantages, provided that the contractual length is long enough to reach payback for the ESCO, the local government is committed for this period of time to the ESCO. The model also might not be applied in locations where an enabling environment is lacking, meaning that in most of the cases in emerging countries, economies, municipalities might need to provide bank. The PPP, the public-private partnership, there will be a presentation later on. And if I'm well informed, you already had a whole webinar on PPPs. So I wonder what new I can say. PPPs are typically long-term cooperative arrangements between one or more public entities and a private organization where there is an allocation of risk between the partners. The aim of this relationship is to use public policies and regulations to leverage private sector financing, who will receive payments from the public entity for providing a defined service. PPP enables local governments to access financing and technical expertise and also to benefit from operational efficiency by shifting performance and technology risks to the private sector. As for disadvantages, the model has relatively high transaction costs. Also, trust plays an important role, and if one party feels they are losing some of the control, they may work on adopting more rules and regulations throughout the process instead of working together. Different actors also can have different timelines. Non-profits usually have long-term, for-profit organizations short-term. Additionally, government agencies' timeline is heavily depending on the election cycle. The revolving fund is one of my favorite mechanisms and maybe is also one of the least complicated ones. It is actually a type of municipal fund and a fund that is set up for specified purposes with the concept that repayments to the fund may be used again for investments. Sometimes it starts from putting every year a certain percentage of a revenue to a dedicated fund, or the national government can give direct grants as an initial capital injection into the revolving fund. The biggest advantage is that once implemented, the revolving fund model can be self-sustaining. The repayments can be utilized to finance additional projects, also adaptation projects, which is so many times so difficult. There is no fiscal year limitation, and the revolving funds might provide a solution for locations when there is an underdeveloped credit market. Disadvantages are that securing the upfront financing and recovering operating costs in early years can be difficult. The repayment periods may be also long, typically 5 to 8 years, if not even more. And the fund may vary from year to year due to financial sources mobilized and the return of. We will also have a presentation today on green bonds, so I try to keep it very short. The bonds can be issued by development financial institutions, commercial banks, state, municipalities, and also by corporations. The issuer of a municipal bond receives a cash purchase price at the time of issuance in exchange for a promise to repay the purchasing investors or their transferees, the bondholder, over time. These repayment periods can be short, such as few months, but in most of the cases we speak about years like 20, 30, 40 years or even longer periods. Bonds are really great. They can enhance issuers' reputations. They provide improved access to specific set of global investors who have mandates to invest in green or sustainable ventures. But issuing a bond is strongly dependent on the credit rating and therefore, unfortunately, rarely suitable for local governments in the global south. Also, the preparatory work is quite time-taking, the institutional setup, the verification, and many times it is determined by the national regulations if a local government can issue a bond. Leveraging public land and assets, I think it's really a key tool, as many local governments are cash poor but land rich. In countries where all urban land is owned by the public sector, land is by far the most valuable asset on the municipal balance sheet. Selling or leasing municipality-owned land, purchasing development rights can be innovative ways to attract investors and can provide finance for infrastructure development. And this works also for local governments with limited fiscal autonomy and with small budgets. Land value capture is a typical tool, leveraging public land, upzoning a land, changing an area for more intense development and commercial use, improving road infrastructure. Those all increase the demand for such areas. Therefore, also, they increase the value of the land. For CSR funds, it is also common to use that municipality brings in the land and then the private partner invests. A disadvantage is, of course, that land sources are limited, and fiscal experts also warn cities not to become too dependent upon asset sales. Furthermore, it is difficult to control development once the land has been sold. So maybe instead of sale, leasing is the best. The last tool I want to talk about is crowdfunding, which is an alternative source of income for local governments. It is guided by the principle that citizens can voluntarily invest a certain financial amount into a proposed project. It suits funding small projects. It is a fast way to raise finance with no upfront fees. It's a good way to test the public's reaction to a project idea, and the investors can become very loyal customers. The disadvantage is that it takes a while to build up trust and to create interest. There is also no guarantee that the required funding target will be reached, and failed projects can also. Ending my presentation, I would like to share with you some closing remarks I see related to this topic. Innovative financing mechanisms are important market catalyzers, and they require collaboration between the public and the private sector. Such partnerships lower the financial risks of a project and create a common strong focus on timely delivery and bringing results. To be successful, tailor-made solutions are needed. De-risking instruments are important to leverage capital, but there is also a need to take certain risks, understanding the urgency of development need and transformative changes. Local and regional governments, on the other hand, shall also be more open to explore innovative options, exchange experience and lessons learned with other subnational actors. And this is what we are just doing here today. With this, I would like to thank your attention and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much to Esther for her great overview of the different possibilities that we have when we talk about innovative funding mechanisms, and in particular also for giving us a first idea of what does that mean in reality. I think also the fact that we managed to already tackle some aspects around the pros and cons is quite important, because as shared in her final remark, indeed, not every solution is adaptable or equally functional for every place in the world. So I think that's particularly important. I would like to invite you all, of course, to post your questions to Esther. She's on the line with us, so happy to, I'm sure, to clear any doubts that you might have or to open up the discussion with you. One of the things that also came across from both the presentations that we had so far is around the importance of engaging partners, and in particular then this idea of also reaching out to stakeholders and to invest into this process. And as I mentioned before, there is a question already posted in chat for NILAB from Vatni Krishna. Apologies if I'm butchering anyone's name. I sincerely apologize already for that. But the question is, money going to stakeholders engagement is low. That was one of the statements that you made following up in one of your slides, Nilab. Can you please give a little bit further explanation on that point? I'm afraid you're muted.
Thank you, Georgia. Yeah, get a bit excited. No, it's a very valid question. And when I talk about stakeholder engagement in an urban context, basically two stakeholders are primary in my mind. One is the citizen, and second are the businesses. So when you look at citizens, and I'll give you a very small example. In many cities in India, you would have seen that the government has built what we call skywalks, or overhead bridges for walking. But when I see those bridges, I see most of them are not utilized and, are empty. And some of them are gone with a lot of investments. And my sort of thought there is that why is the government, or why have they spent so much money when people are not using it? And the idea is brilliant. I mean, there is no reason to not have built those overhead bridges. But why are they not being used? And that's where I mean that citizens have to be engaged so that they can adopt the solutions that you want to. Change is not easy for any one of us, and we are all resistant to change. So our habits are such, and unless you engage with the citizens to change their habits, most of your solutions will take a lot of long time to be adopted. So that's one thing. Secondly, when we look at the businesses, so I think today, when we talk about sustainability and climate action, businesses are key to be involved and to participate actively in our discourse and the implementation of solutions. Until now, of course, businesses see that as a CSR activity, which is fine, but I think they have to play a more proactive and engaged role. I mean, even if you look at the sessions that we are running today, what is the participation from businesses in our session today? I don't know the numbers, but it's probably not too high. And that is my point, that businesses are extremely important. They are the ones who will actually, deliver the change. Because today we are a market-driven economy. For whatever reason, we may argue about different forms of economics. But that is the world we are living in today. And therefore, engagement with businesses is crucial in my mind. I hope that somewhat clarifies the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Neela. Esther, from your side, would you have any comments on who is important to engage at what stage? And maybe also, I thought it was very interesting when you were mentioning these other processes and how they link into the choice that you make with funding. You were talking about electoral cycles, for example. How does that all come together in your view?
Yes, thank you, Georgia. It comes together very well, Neela already mentioned the importance of engagement of citizens, which I find also critical. And it's critical also because if you have engaged stakeholders, engaged citizens, it can also help you to come over the difficulties you would face with the electoral cycles. What we see many times, especially these big infrastructure projects, they take long, so it can take even more electoral cycles until implementation, getting in the phase of implementation. And then maybe the local government has the new mayor, a different interest, other priorities. If the project is well embedded, if there is a really strong stakeholder commitment and engagement, this wouldn't guarantee still 100% that the project can stay a priority, but still that there are much better chances that the project stays as a priority. And also in some cases, regarding citizens' engagement, a success of a project. If you want to use, for example, fees or taxes for financing and funding your project, it's critical that the citizens really engage and really pay that fee and those charges and those taxes. Of course, for that you also need a proper enabled environment to collect those, but also the willingness of the citizens is absolutely critical. So maybe that's what I would like to add, but Nilab already summarized it perfectly. It's just, stakeholder mapping is really very important already at the very, very early stage of the project preparation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this point of engaging citizens not just as a recipient of what we are developing, but rather as a source on how we can support it is particularly important. And speaking of resources, Nilab, there is another question for you from Saili Mankikar. The question is, when you talk about endogenous sources, can you elaborate a little bit how?
So in respect to ULBs or cities, it is basically the tax revenue that is, as of today, the main source of endogenous, which is internal source of revenue. And that is what I mean, that cities should sort of be optimal in terms of raising tax revenue, but also be creative. I think the cities are doing a lot of work on that front in India. They're trying to raise capital internally from their own internal structures. Also, there has been an amendment to the Constitution of India where there's a lot of devolution of power to Indian cities with the 74th Constitution Amendment, which I think everybody knows. So that is a step in the right direction. I think one would argue that the implications of that need to be sort of hastened, and the speed needs to be sort of brought in to implement these changes. But I think it's already happening. So I think that's a good thing. So cities should look at their own assets that they have, and each city has a different asset base, and try to see how they can monetize that and raise money through internal means. I think that is the first thing. And then also, some cities that are slightly smaller might find it difficult. So there we would, talk about blending or pooling resources either with another city or, even within cities looking at different sources of financing. So it's all about being creative, I would say, in this case, and not depend so much on external grants or state funding or state aid. So it's about being proactive and being creative. That's what our finding has been.
Thank you very much, Nilab. I'm a little bit conscious of time, but I see there are two more questions in the chat that I would like to try to comment upon. So Esther, maybe for you, just in a nutshell, speaking about being creative, a city has to be indeed creative in trying to also identify what sort of mechanisms can be used for their own purpose. In particular, do you have any specific guidelines on small and intermediate cities and what kind of financing mechanism they can identify? Conscious of the fact that, of course, we have the breakout rooms later and you can go more into the detail, but just maybe a couple of points.
Yeah, I think here we also have to distinguish a bit the global south and the global north, and here among the participants we have a mixture. So, but as this is regional dialogue India, I will focus on global south. And here, of course, the big barrier is the dependency of the national government, the very limited fiscal autonomy. So that's really leading, just as Nilab also pointed it out, to be creative. And I would really encourage everyone to see what you can use with your own sources, how to be creative, not depending on, just as Nilab said, not depending on external finance. So, and here, of course, as I also pointed out in my presentation, one of the biggest value you have is your land, is your assets. So you can always think about how to use that, how to valorize that, how to create profit upon that. Or, you can start with very small. I'm unfortunately not that familiar with the system in India, but we have seen in many other countries, using the taxes and the different fees that the municipality collects to start to build up a municipal fund, which then can be invested in other projects. So maybe that would be my suggestion, that think first what you have own sources available and try to be creative within your frame, how to optimize them the best.
Thank you very much, Esther. And finally, maybe a question to Nila, but also to Panagiotis, if I can get you back on our virtual stage, Panagiotis. There's a question around the potential for EU and IUC to be an incubation agency to navigate various ULB projects and create win-win propositions between investors and cities. Any comments on this from your side?
Yeah, thank you. Can I make a quick comment? The answer is definitely yes. I think what we see and what we have seen over the last 2-3 years is that we had a number of very strong cooperations between Indian cities and European cities, and there was a process of identification of projects, then selecting one of them, and then going through the process of some kind of initial feasibility study or baseline study or pre-feasibility. We have very good examples. One will be presented later today by Mr. Rodriguez, the Commissioner of Panjim, looking at the smart parking pilot project in Panjim. So this is, let's say, the first step. We have another example from Surat regarding a water plaza. The first step to understanding what are the needs of the project, what are the requirements, how it can move on, and from some point onwards, it's up to the city or up to other projects to take this further. So I think this kind of project, EU, IUC, the forthcoming IURC, can help in improving the maturity, let's say, of the projects till they reach a good level for further financing.
Thank you. Nila, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I think this is also the ambition between India and EU when we cooperate with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. They want to see more sort of concrete projects coming out of our collaboration. And so we are moving in that direction, and I think whether we want to call it an incubation agency or just a kind of a platform, because in some sense, we are restricted or limited in the structures that we operate in as well. But there are quite a few platforms supported by the EU that operate as incubation and support businesses and development of new technologies in India. So, yeah, I think it's a point in the right direction, and there's also some amount of work going in that front.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm extremely happy that everyone seems to be excited about the conversation. So I think now we will have, unfortunately, to move on to our next phase, but not to be worried. As I mentioned before, we will have the breakout rooms in which we will be able to certainly continue the conversation and to go more into detail into these aspects. We'll now move on and go more into the practical, real-life examples of how really cities are experiences this world of financing, ambition, sustainable, and climate action. And we will look into particularly three great examples coming from cities, and who will share their hands-on experience in acquiring funding and financing their own action. So we will start with the city of Nagpur, and it's my great pleasure to introduce to our virtual floor Ms. Suryan Bunezewari. She's the CEO of the Nagpur Smart and Sustainable City Development Corporation. Can you hear us, Ms. Bunezewari?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Perfect. The floor is yours. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for this opportunity. I think I'm not able to see the presentation.
It's on the screen.
I'm not able to see the presentation.
Okay. We can see it, and it's on the screen for us. Maybe I would ask my colleagues to please give us a hand with this. Perhaps reshare the presentation, sharing your screen so that everyone can see it. And Ms.
No, we have given the presentation to the team for them to put it up.
Yeah, it's already online. So I don't know why you are not able to see it. That's the challenge. We all see it as participants.
Okay. So then I have a copy with me. With that, I will start. So
that's fine. You can tell us to move to the next slide if you like. We can do that for you.
Yes. Yeah. Now I'm able to see. Yes. Next slide. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bhuvaneshwari, IAS officer. I am posted as a CEO Smart City Nagpur. So these are some of the projects as a part of the Smart City we are taking. I would like to brief a little bit on these projects because based on this idea only, we will be able to know what are the funding issues we are facing. The first thing is our town planning scheme. In the town planning scheme, we are proposing it in a brownfield area. In the brownfield area means we already have entire settlement there. Many are legally settled, and many people are settled there without any legal documents. So now we are planning a town planning scheme in that area, wherein we are planning a 51-kilometer stretch road there. That road will be inclusive of all the stormwater drainage, sewage lines, and all future whatever lines that we want to dig in. There will not be any separate need for it because we are planning two separate lines for all our future needs. So this is a 51-kilometer stretch we are planning, and the town planning scheme involves reservations for various gardens, hospitals, and this entire area is 1,700 square meter. So this is our first scheme. So our major funding, whatever we have from our for this particular entire smart city project, our majority of the funding is going into our town planning scheme. The second project is in the town planning scheme, we have a 51-kilometer road. That 51-kilometer road that includes the sidewalks, culverts, bridges, everything. This is taken care under the name of the project Tendersure. Next is a Home Sweet Home project. In this Home Sweet Home project, there are many people who will have to be shifted because of this town planning scheme. When we have some reservation for a garden or for an hospital in a particular area, there we already have people there, we will have to shift them. So those people, we are shifting them in our Home Sweet Home project. This is around 600 houses we are planned, 1,024 houses we have planned in almost like 10 floors. This is another project that we are doing. Next is a project Greenlight. In this project Greenlight, this was implemented by the Nagpur Municipal Corporation. This was a convergence project. In this, all the sodium vapor lamps that were there are replaced with an LED lamps. We have almost replaced 1,39,000. Okay. So we have focused more 1,39,000 lights we have done, and in that we have saved around 2,27,000 units of carbon units we have saved. Next is the Nirmal Nag River project. In this, we are concentrating on river pollution abatement. So since we have to concentrate more on financing part, I would like to highlight a few projects that are related to sustainable and climate related things. One is our e-rickshaw project. In our ABD area, in the town planning scheme, wherever we are implementing, in that particular area, we would like to give e-rickshaws to people who are affected by our project. That project, since we don't have enough funding, we have not yet taken care of those projects. And the other is the Smart Bus Shelter project. In the Smart Bus Shelter project, we have two things. One is we are having an e-bus system, electric buses, and also there will be a shelters, bus shelters, which will be taking care. We will have a smart shelters there. Next is a share bike project. In the share bike project, we have already given a proposal for our feasibility study report has been submitted. So in this, what we are planning to do is we will be having a motorized and non-motorized bike and multiple docking stations. This is to enable to reduce the pollution. This is our major project that we would like to highlight in this. Next. So when we look into the estimated cost of this project estimates around 1,000 crores, that is in phase 1, and in phase 2 we have 1,034 crores, and in phase 3 in Indian rupees it is 1,224 crores. Next. So right now we are in the phase 1. In this phase 1, mostly our ABD intervention, like how I told initially, our town planning scheme, which involves rehabilitating people and paying compensation to the people, and also constructing the roads and necessary infrastructure there. This is costing us more of our project money, our 876 crores have been used in this particular project. When we look into our Pan City intervention, that we have our entire city is connected with, we have laid in optical fibers, and we are mostly we are monitoring with the smart signals, and we are also having CCTV networks to monitor the traffic systems. And we also have an automatic software that helps us in monitoring that. For that particular project, we have contributed from the smart cities only 126 crores. The remaining contribution is done by the Home Department and the Maha IT. So that project we are only contributing 10%. Our major contribution from our smart city goes for the area-based development. Next. So when we look into our core infrastructure facility, Tendershore project, that is a basic infrastructural project that we are doing. In this, what we are doing is we are laying down the utilities. Generally what happens in India, if we see, once the proper road is laid, and then every department will do a digging now and then. One department will dig the road this month, and after 4 months again we repair the road, again another department will dig. In order to prevent all such things in the future, this Tendershore project, once the road is laid now, we have a trench on both the sides, trench to have enough utility for all our future requirements, be it electricity, MSEB wires, or any other cables that we want to lay down in the future. We will not be disturbing our existing infrastructure. So this is our major project, and this we are doing it in our ABD area, that is our town planning scheme area. This this is around 51 kilometers that we are concentrating. Next. Next is our social. Yeah, previous slide, please. Previous slide. Yeah. So in our social infrastructures, we have our public health centers, schools, bicycle sharing, CCTV, smart police outposts. In all these projects, our major concentration is regarding the police monitoring systems. We have contributed 10% from the smart city, and the remaining is being contributed by the Maha IT. And all other projects like school, public health centers, parks and playgrounds. Regarding parks, we are trying to do it with the people's contribution. Any landowner whose land is being taken for the parks or gardens, if they are willing to develop that particular area, they are doing in collaboration with our smart city. So right now, other than that, we are running short of funds to do with our other schemes. Next. So when we look into the potential sources, basically our funding comes mainly from the state government and the central government. And we have hardly got a very few CSR funding, 30 lakhs of CSR fund, 30 lakhs Indian rupees of CSR funding, we have got it till now. The land monetization or the developmental charges, these are all the second and the third stages. That will happen only when the entire ABD area is done and the people give, now we have a huge opposition from the people regarding the developmental charges. Whatever developmental charges right now we levy, people are in complete opposition of that. So that will take some time for it to come. Even the land monetization. So right now we don't have any land parcels in our name. Even the land, government land is being occupied by squatters and people illegally. So we are even paying for their structures to take them out from that area so that they can be rehabilitated in a proper way. So land monetization right now, since this is an SPV, we do not have any land in our possession. We have our Nagpur Improvement Trust. They hold a land parcel, and even to get from one government agency to another agency, we will not get it at free of cost. That is one major issue that we are facing. Premium FSI, so right now with the existing FSI, we are not able to completely use our existing FSI. The people mindset is not going beyond the 5 floors. So when we wanted to construct a building with G+10 in our Home Sweet Home project, it is becoming very difficult for us to convince our people to go to the higher level. So this will take up in the future, but right now we are not seeing a good scope for that. Regarding public-private partnership, as we told earlier, this is an ABD area, and now we don't have any land parcels where we could be able to give it to the private people for public-private partnership. And also, since our company is small, we are not able to get much of the public-private partnerships. Next is our debt service funding. once we started this project, we did not envisage that we'll have to pay people or we will have to compensate people for the land and for their structures. Initially, the assumption was generally in any town planning scheme, there is a 40-60 rule. That means 40% of the land will be taken and 60% will be given to them on the developed basis. So we were expecting people will be cooperating to it and that will be an easy flow. But when we started implementing the project, that did not happen. So what we had to do is we had to put a huge amount of our money into the rehabilitation purpose. So that is project affected people for paying for their structures or paying for their land values. This is becoming a major component for us. And also we will have to get funds from NIT, Nagpur Improvement Trust, but NMC will also be contributing. But the problem is both these agencies are also running short of money. Both are government agencies and they are also running short of money. So that is one major issue that we face. These are the potential sources, market borrowings, but since we don't have, as a company, we are not that much big enough to get it from the market or to put it into the market, we face that issue. Next is the debt financing and the soft loans from public-private partnership. This is both we are facing the same issue. Next slide. So, as I've already spoken, the major financing team is only the government. We have the funds only from the state government and the central government. And when we look into the in-house capability for innovative financial tools, today's presentation was really good enough. We could have a lot of takeaways how we could go ahead in terms of funding. So that knowledge, financial knowledge, it is a little bit lacking within our team. And the bankability of the specific, we do not have any project wherein we will be able to give the submit it to the bank, get the loan, because this company is a short duration company. This is just a special purpose vehicle. So after our project, this has to go to the NMC. So we have to get the approval of the municipal corporation also, whether they will be able to take care of this burden. So there we have a major issue. And we do not have that much of credit rating like compared with the private investments or a corporate sector. This company is pretty new and we do not have that much of credit rating as well. And regarding the lack of awareness of public institutions regarding CSR. CSR we have got only from very few companies which are related to in Nagpur, or their major bosses were a part of this project or they were in Nagpur. So this was a little contact that we could, but we could not reach out to a much bigger CSR, like how we could get it for a major project. If it is started from the state capital, they would get a major companies getting involved in CSR. And now with the situation of this pandemic, CSR contribution is also reducing to a greater extent. Next. So one of potential solutions, what we could see in this is, one, we need some financial experts in our company. The other is tapping the international funding sources and also training to our staff regarding the funding opportunities. For example, today we saw Indore Smart City has taken the carbon credit. They have monetized the carbon credit. They have done carbon trading. So we are getting in touch with them like how to go ahead. But we would like to know what are the other options more than that, how we could monetize the various resources that we have. Say, for example, our optical fiber line we have. Right now, we are trying to monetize that. We are proposing an EOI. So we need more help in this regard, how we could monetize our further resources. So there needs to be some mechanism to get ratings of these public institutions so that their credit worthiness improves in the view of the public, so that more investment we could get it. And participation in international programs and activities, like we have got a chance to participate with IUC today. Next. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much also for listening not only the solutions that you are implementing and connected and even with very important socioeconomic aspects of what your city is facing in terms of challenges, but also for bringing forward some solutions. And hopefully during the next breakout session, we will have the opportunity to go more into the detail and exchange on this point. But now, conscious of time, I would like to invite to the floor to share their experience Mr. Sanjit Rodriguez. He is the Municipal Commissioner for the City of Panaji, who will talk to us about the development of a smart parking solution, which I believe has been also developed through the cooperation with IUC. Mr. Rodriguez, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Georgia, and a very good afternoon to all participants. Thank you for having us on this interaction. We have been part of an exchange program with IUC with the city of Dubrovnik in Croatia, and it was time to select a project and work in partnership with the city. So when we visited the city, it was very similar. It was a very good pairing, and we had a lot of learnings. Coming from Goa and seeing the tourism potential there and the number of tourists in Goa as well as Dubrovnik, we had common problems, common related issues, and our solutions at times matched. So one of the issues which we chose was to implement a parking project. Next, please. Panjim is a small city. It is a coastal city. Lots of tourists. For every resident, we have around 9 tourists. So it's a huge ratio. And one of the challenges, whose cars are we managing? Are they mostly taxis, tourist buses, residents, and what? First of all, we had to work on convincing of people, because in India, user charges for parking is very rare in small cities like ours. And of course, even large cities today work hard to pass these parking solutions. Well, after our visit and with the help of IIC, their analysts, their people who visited us, we have worked on a lot. We have reviewed the current parking status in our city, identified challenges, looked at Dubrovnik and seen how they have worked and how they have brought about a smart parking solution. We have shortlisted technology, digitalization, and we are at a stage where we want to implement a small pilot. So most of this work has been done. Technology has been identified. So we are looking at implementing it in a small area, and of course convincing the city that we want to go ahead with this. Next, please. So this is our pilot area. Panjim is a coastal city. It's a small city, and we have chosen the central business district of Panjim, which is an old heritage zone. You can see the city has a lot of buildings, low-rise, country-tiled, old Portuguese buildings. And in the midst of all this, where the CBD is, we have tried to go in for pay parking. So we have identified which areas would be exclusively for 4-wheelers, 2-wheelers, and the parking scheme has been demarcated well. People have been taken into confidence. People have worked on all this. All stakeholders, shop owners, residents, everyone has been taken on board, and finally this demarcation has been marked. So once the project is implemented, nobody should have a say in, no, this was not done, I was not consulted. So we have ticked all the boxes before coming up to this stage. Next. Yeah, so the stakeholder engagement process was huge. We have the district magistrate, then we have a smart city office with us, we have IUC, and we have worked with the EBTC, European Business Technology Center here. All of them have given us inputs, and all their inputs have been converged to form this scheme. Then there is the police and the enforcement authorities which have helped us, and we have worked on a very strong, minute, grassroots level stakeholder engagement process which we have completed to arrive at this stage. Next, please. Yeah, so what were the options? We are a small city. We do not have funding. The state government also wants us to work on our own. And how do we fund this project? So one of the things is we have first decided to start a manual pay parking system and outsource it to a competent agency. So we have marked, the program was ready. The technology aspect would take revenues from us. So we have decided to start this pay parking project, and we have worked on a pay parking scheme throughout the city. Almost 70 to 80% of our main roads have been converted to pay parking. Notifications are out, people have been taken into confidence, and phase 1 of pay parking has already started. Now, we are trying to conserve the revenues which this pay parking gives. It is a new source of income for the city. It is a new source of revenue generation, and we have monetized all aspects pertaining to pay parking. Pay parking boards have been allowed to use some sort of advertisement. And there are bins around the place where we have worked on smart bins, and in these areas monetized advertisement revenue, especially in heavy traffic of tourist areas. And we have collected this revenue. And this revenue is going to be used to start the technology-driven smart parking system in the pilot zone. And slowly we are going to extend this technology throughout the city. We cannot have everything we wish for. We have tried to limit our want to a pilot project, though the pay parking is thought to be implemented throughout the city and obtaining this revenue, which has started. We are waiting for IUC to come up with the final technology document, which we would then tender, and this pilot project would go through using the revenues which the city has already started getting through starting pay parking initially. So we have started our pay parking. We have not gone helter-skelter to find funds. Once the approval was given, we have started in our own way, and these revenues are going to now convert the system to a smart one. So which will help the city to monetize this pay parking scheme even more minutely. There are today in the manual system, there is leakage in the system, there is argumentation, but in a smart one, these areas will be avoided, and we have a foolproof system. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. So how does Panti fund some other urban and climate projects? I want to just briefly touch on my last slide. This is a project which is very dear to the city. We are a city which is landfill free in waste management. We do not have a landfill, and the city has chosen to be landfill free, but it comes at a cost. So we have worked on a 16-way segregation at source. If you see our city today, all residential complexes, gated communities, buildings segregate in 16-way, and we have funded this purely through user fees. Every resident pays for their waste to be taken out. So these user fees, definitely it's not enough, but we have then graded fees for commercial, hotels, restaurants, and all tourism stakeholders. And we have convinced people that if you want tourism to prosper, if you want our city to be clean, we have to pay for it. So a lot of user fees have been collected. Segregation systems have been put in place. We have got CSR funding from bulk plastic generators, especially PET bottles, soft drink manufacturers, and a lot of research projects and papers have been worked based on the Panjim model of waste management from ICLE, GIZ, TERI, and IUC. We have come up with a landfill-free city. We have saved up to date millions and millions of GHGs going out from a landfill and from non-segregated dumping of waste. So this is another project, and we have funded this project purely through user fees and through internal accruing of revenue. This is because people have supported us. People want our city cleaner, and environment is close to the city's heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez, and we hope that we can also maybe dig a little bit more into your second project that you have presented today during our discussions later on. But now I would like to give promptly the floor to our last speaker of the day from the city of Malmö, Mr. Klaas Ramel, who is going to be presenting to us a little bit how the city has been using green bonds. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Georgia, and thanks for this opportunity to present the City of Malmö and the work that we do with green bonds. Hope you can all hear me clearly and maybe also see me here.
Yes.
Thanks. The first picture was a picture of Malmö. We unfortunately don't have such beautiful views as you do in Panaji, but at least there was a little slide there. To give you a brief background, Sweden has about 10 million inhabitants, and the City of Malmö has 350,000, and this makes us the third largest city after Stockholm and Göteborg. We do experience a rapid growth, so we expect to be 500,000 people by year 2050. And a city in Sweden typically works with these obligations. We provide for elementary education, we provide for wastewater management and safe water, and we provide for local city infrastructure, roads, pavements, and so on. We provide for housing opportunities for people, and we social care and many other things, of course. Next slide, please. Now, the economic conditions for Swedish municipalities that we do have income taxation rights. So these taxes basically funds for the municipal budget, the operations that we run from day to day. When we do more heavy investments, and I think of investments separate from operations, then we need to raise external funds because the taxation money is not enough to do these investments. Sometimes we have positive outcome in our budgets, and then we can raise funds internally. But most of the time, we need to raise external capital for investments, and that could be into various things that I will come mention later. But we do this with banks, also multinational banks, such as the European Investment Bank, for instance, and also ourselves in the capital markets by issuing bonds. And we have a very fortunate situation, of course. We have a credit rating from Standard & Poor's, which is AAA. So, of course, raising funds for us is rather favorable and also easy to access as it is. Next, please. Now the green bonds, this was an effort by the politicians. They wanted to implement green bonds in the City of Malmö. We were not first, but we came in 2017. Other municipalities started earlier than us. We use the International Capital Market Association principles, the green bond principles. We follow those in our setting up of the green bonds. We have very high climate ambitions in the city. We want to become the most climate-friendly city in Sweden. We want to make it easy for people to make climate-friendly decisions. We were also very early on, I think the first one, to sign the UN Sustainable Development Goals Treaty. So we have a strong commitment to that. And we think we describe in our reporting that the green bond framework and the reporting that we do annually targets about half of the 17 goals in the social development goals. Now, the green bond should improve the sustainable processes in this city, and it should also work to improve our reaching those goals that we have in the development goals. The city goals should work towards those. Next slide, please. Now, back to the green bond framework, we have 8 categories, and I have chosen to show you 4 of those, the more important ones. So we fund, with our green bonds, we fund green and energy efficient buildings. We find clean transportation, that could be roads for buses, that could be bicycle roads, etc. We have wastewater management. As been mentioned before, that's very important, and a municipal obligation to perform. And being a city located next to the water and the oceans, we take seriously the climate change adaptation measures that we need to perform. And So beyond these investments that we do and fund with green bonds, this makes a stronger connection, I should say, to our borrowers. They know how we spend their money, and they get an annual report where we describe for the investors how their money has been used and what climate effects these money have performed. And what we do now is that we want to expand. So beyond green bonds, we also have a task to create a social bond framework where we issue bonds that finance social issues. So that is rather new. It has not been very present in Sweden as of yet. No municipality has issued social bonds yet. So we think we will be among the earlier ones here. Next, please. Yeah, my last slide here. So as you can tell, this is very general presentation, but the goals in the social development goals on a global level are incorporated into the city council. So the city council has its own goals, and then in the budget, these goals are then more concretely adopted. So one goal is to improve urban planning. We have limited space, so we need to use our space wisely and also have a strong climate focus. And so that's one sort of challenge, to sort of bring down the development goals into concrete actions for ourselves. One issue and challenge we have is with the green bond reporting. When we do decide on investments, building a school, climate adaptation measures or whatever, we need to be better at an early stage, know how to report on these investments. So that's a bit of a process. It's also a bit of a system to be developed, but we are improving this, and we need this to make the issuance of green bonds smoother. And we know that going forward, everything will need to be reported back to our borrowers. So that's a challenge for us. And the last few things here. We need to find smarter climate solutions, of course. There are incubators in the city, not run by the city, but that we support. We have increased cooperations with local actors outside the private sector, the authorities, the university that we have in the city, and the civil society. And one such example is not here actually, but we do work towards the Agenda 2030 with builders, for instance, to create a better life cycle perspective on the building process. And that is also a profitable process that's good for the builders as well. So there's a strong unity in developing a better way to climate-friendly buildings. And the last quote on the shoulder of giants is basically to say that we like to be first and we like to be innovative, but we also need to work with others and what others have learned and brought forward. So we can't do this by ourselves, but we need to improve on climate action together with our local communities in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klaus, for your presentation, and also for making the strong connection between financing and the activities of the city and these larger development goals that we all have ahead of ourselves, and we really need to contribute through our local action. This was also, of course, one of the important aspects of the IUC program, so it was really nice to see how it is embedded in the policy and in the activities in Malmö. So thank you for that. It was very inspiring. Now, we will have the opportunity to continue our conversation. We are a little bit late, so my suggestion would be to have 20 minutes round for discussion rather than 30, and to then reconvene and to try to end our event with 10 minutes late. I really hope that you can all stay with us. Now it gets good, as one could say. So we will divide in two breakout rooms. You will be automatically redirected there. One room will be moderated by Milad and the other one by Esther. You met them earlier today. And the idea for discussion will be to pin down some solutions and some possible ideas around the three main questions. What kind of barriers is your city facing, and what are the biggest challenges? What kind of solution did you implement, and what solution can you share with others? And what have you learned today, and what would you like to replicate in your own context? So you even have the opportunity to pick the brain of the cities that have presented, as well as our experts, so to see what would be fit for purpose for your city. So it will all be done automatically. You just have to accept our invitation to display it into your room, and we will reconvene later all together to summarize our discussion. So thank you very much, and see you in about 20 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a fruitful discussion. Let's say there is never enough time for discussion, at least in our room. We've been extremely busy trying to share on challenges, but also some good solutions, some interesting idea and replicating some new concepts on green bonds. So lots of food for thought. Unfortunately, we have been cut short from our discussion, but we hope that we will continue to be able to exchange in the future. Now, to share a little bit what are the results of the discussion that you had in the different room. Can I ask Nila maybe to take us through some of the key points and the most interesting aspects of your conversation?
Yes, so I'm happy to do that. Nicola, are you going to flash something, or should I just go through my notes?
Hello, Nila, if you can please go to your notes.
Okay, perfect.
Time. Yeah,
perfect. So basically what we did was we tried to build on the presentation that we had from Nagpur as kind of a case study in our session, and to try and discuss some of the areas or the solutions that we could help Nagpur with. And the key challenges sort of that we identified were, of course, financing, but also this whole aspect of land acquisition, and because of the recent reforms in land acquisition in India, there have been certain issues which have always been there in some sense. So we discussed about that, and we also discussed the knowledge sharing amongst the various municipal commissioners and CEOs. So there is a reasonable amount of knowledge sharing where cities or the CEOs and commissioners can learn from some of the other cities that have done some good work. So I think that is already happening, which is a very positive indication. Because, of course, from a European side, we can bring in some of the solutions and aspects, but it's more in situ that these solutions are developed. So I think the local homegrown solutions are somehow always the best ones. And then finally, there was the discussion on trying to use more CSR. One of the participants raised the very good point about how CSR can be more involved in helping cities, and we heard from Panjim that they have been quite successful in raising CSR funds, and so has Nagpur in some of its bike sharing initiatives. So I think that was the overall discussion we had. I don't think we have succeeded in solving the problems of or the challenges in some of the cities in 20 minutes. But we did have an open discussion, and I think we will engage further through our programs and projects to see how we can further develop some of the thoughts and ideas into concrete solutions.
Thank you very much, Nila. I think this is very encouraging. Of course, 20 minutes or 30 minutes even is not enough to go through different solutions and then try to really understand how to adapt them to different contexts. But it's very nice to hear that it was a starting of a conversation. So we hope that will continue also across this city. I would like to ask if anyone in that group has any remarks or anything they would like to add to the already quite extensive, of course, and complete presentation that Nila made. I think you did a great job, Nila. No, you can still put it in chat, of course. We will read them out loud later. So, Esther, maybe I can give you the floor to give us some insights on the discussion.
Sure. Shall I also use my notes, or Sylvia, we can share the... No, okay, so I use my notes.
Just in the interest of time, we are a little bit.
Yeah. No. Absolutely understood. It's just I certainly invite my group to add and comment because I'm not sure I managed to capture everything. So we were talking about the bonds and that Malmö is now, of course, has challenges submitting the new bond, the new social bond, which has, of course, a different focus than the green bonds. What was very encouraging from Malmö, saying that credit rating is not. They were very lucky to have a good credit rating, but it is not a must. So it was very encouraging not to neglect the idea just when you don't have a really good credit rating. We were talking about the importance of stakeholder engagement again, and how much it is a key, and how much you can also influence and build on the citizens' behavior and engagement. And here we had the example of Leuven, encouraging that even with starting very small actions, a group event in the street then can create a much bigger mobilization and engagement. So also mentioning the importance of the communication channels that you shall use to keep the topics and the agenda of the people. We were discussing also a bit on the dependency on endogenous funding and the deficiency of the system, meaning that the local governments, after paying all the taxes, they don't get back all the benefits that they should get for all these collected taxes. And here was also a reference to the discussions we had earlier today regarding the empowerment of the government. There is a good evolution in India, but still only 11 actions, if I understood well, are funded, and not all what the local governments are responsible for. And then finally, we had a very nice example from Delhi, bringing us an example. Schools, they have solar lamps, and they brought an example how schools also managed to become directly eligible for carbon credits. So maybe that's my short summary, but I really encourage everyone from the group if I forgot something or they would like to compliment.
And now then it's your turn to complement Esther's comments. You can, of course, either write it down or please feel free also to unmute yourself and to give us your thoughts. This is your last chance before the conclusion of our session. Maybe I would also like to invite the colleagues from the EU delegation, like Camilla Christensen, for example, or the colleagues from the Commission, whether they would want to comment also from their side on anything.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to do that. Thank you very much. It has been a really good session and very interesting topics we have come across here. And so this has been really good. What I want to just mention from a more practical point, well, if you can say in India and from the EU delegation, is that how I basically see it is that when for example, the projects in the EU International Urban Cooperation Program, India, it can be our partnership project, India EU Urban Partnership, and it could be other of our EU-funded projects in India, or of course funded by the EU. I basically think that it will be, we welcome a dialogue in when the projects are coming to the stage where probably what we can say we are now to some extent on the EU International Urban Cooperation Program, like for Nagpur or for Panaji or for other of the cities in cooperation, so that we can kind of have a dialogue from the projects, from the IUC, from the partnership into the EU delegation in India, and then we can understand where the projects are. Are they in the from the local action plan? Are they at the baseline study stage? Are they at the feasibility stage? Are they towards the tender process? And then basically take it from there. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's very good to end up in such a positive and proactive note as well. So I'm sure that everyone is very interested to continue this conversation. Maybe before I close, can I also give the floor to Panagiotis for a farewell from his side?
I would like to thank all the participants for the useful contribution. Definitely to thank the Municipal Commissioner from Panjim, the CEO from Nagpur, and also the representative from Malmo for the very valuable practical input to this discussion, and looking forward to continuing the cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Panagiotis, and thank you very much to everyone also from my side, from our keynotes, to our moderators, to our participants that have contributed so actively into the discussion. Maybe to conclude from my side, I just want to highlight once again how impressive is the amount of knowledge and heart that our cities in the IUC program have been putting into this cooperation, sharing with their peers, exchanging on the solution and trying to find common solutions even to these challenges that they are facing in these years that are particularly troublesome. And we are just coming out right now of a very difficult period with the COVID-19 crisis, but also with the climate emergency that altogether collectively we will have to face. As you know, the IUC program, it was already announced, is now coming closer to an end, but this is just an end of one phase. We will have an IUC kicking off at the beginning of next year. So my encouragement is to please keep up with the good work and keep exchanging and keep learning from each other. There is such incredible amount of brain power and experience here. And if you want to learn more about the field of financing and how IUC cities have been working collectively, not only to plan and to implement the solution, but also to fund some funds, I would like to conclude inviting you to the final conference, which will take place next week on the 3rd of December. We hope to see you all there, numerous, to also learn what the other regions, Latin America, North America, and other parts of Asia have been doing together with our European cities. So again, just a big, big thank you, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.